you make a film at Shepperton and hire a sound stage, you get literally 4 walls, a floor and a roof. Everything else you have to fit in yourself. Buying, hiring and making lights, scenery, props, cameras and all the technical equipment you need. And the people who work on the film have to be hired specially too. Erik the Viking is in fact using 2 sound stages. And while scenes are being shot here, another stage is being prepared to depict the home of the gods. The plasterer shop has been busy making the pillars and slabs which are being put into place ready for shooting in a few days' time. The director of this epic, Gareth Jones, requires these settings for a story he thought up some time ago, which he always wanted to make into a film.
Originally, I sort of started looking at the Viking sagas and thinking, oh, it's a good idea to do a bit of research and everything. But in fact, as I started reading the Viking sagas, I suddenly realised they're all about revenge and killing. And I mean, they're terribly miserable, not the Vikings were. So I thought, well, I won't read them. I'll just make up my own stories.
So what are the good elements in a Viking story?
It's sort of, I suppose, the feeling of adventure, the feeling of being up against the elements, I think, is what's good. You're living in a very kind of rudimentary society, and there's just you and the north wind, and that's kind of a heroic feel to it. The way I work is that I really can't work without a script, and I need to know I've got a script that is really going to work and is good, and that I'm happy with before I can actually have the face to go into somebody's office and say, look, I've got this film I'd like to make for you, please. Would you like to give me so many $1 million? I've really got to know I've got a good script there first.
Well, Terry should be happy with the script as he's written it. But what about the Vikings? What do they think of it all? Well, from what I've seen today, it's all sort of big action stuff. Is there any sort of heavy dialogue moments as well? It's very different, isn't it?
Not a lot of heavy dialogue. A lot of heavy action. It's big. Everything's big. It's right over the top. You know, we have the OTT police constantly monitoring what we're doing because everything's like one over the top.
And how is Terry as a director? Terry's job covers many areas, and he's responsible for making sure all the bits and pieces fit together to make the final film. To do that, he's got to give a lot of attention to detail, especially the costumes.
Well, from the start, Gareth Jones said we want it to be realistic and no horns, so there's no horns on the helmets. I don't know, we kind of tried to demystify it and try to make the clothing very practical, as it must have been. You know, they're fighting guys and they have everything they need on them.
What about the colours? It must have been tempting to brighten the whole thing up.
The whole idea of the colour of it was something that really interests me anyway. I like dyeing and I like natural dyes, so the palette you can get with natural dyes is huge, in fact, and some you can get very bright colours. Most of it did tend towards the ochre because we knew in the scenes in Ravensfjord, where they start out from, which is in Norway, it would be very black and white, snow and black rock. So they're all quite down colours.
I suppose you have to make the clothes look lived in. How do you go about doing that?
For a start, to dye them naturally helps because we dye them blotchily, so that already looks quite lived in and soft. And then you just take cheese graters and bleach and surforms to them and, just grate your hands to death.
So tell me something about getting them wet. I mean, how do you stop actors from dying from exposure?
Sometimes they'd have a thermal vest on and then they'd have the wetsuit, then they'd have the costume. But it's not only the kind of exposure element of it, they were actually chucking tons of water at them. They have this thing called a tip tank. It's basically 4 dumper trucks full of water, which can tip up to 5 tons on top of you. So it was kind of wetness on a scale you don't really encounter in the rest of life, it's a bit drastic.
Well, I guess in this outfit, I'd always be warm.